Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. You are now listening to season 7 of the show. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Anusia Gillespie. Anusia completed her Bachelor of Science in Management at Tulane University, her Juris Doctor at Boston College Law School, and her MBA also at Boston College. Previously, Anusia was the first head of innovation at Evershed Sutherland, US, and spent a year as a senior manager program design and development at Harvard Law School Executive Education. In 2019, Anusia was awarded the Fast Case 50 Award. More recently, Anusia hosted a virtual roundtable event with legal pioneers Richard Susskind and Mark Cohen. So, a very, very warm welcome, Anusia.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the kind introduction. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, and I really enjoyed your recent events. And before we get into all your amazing projects, experiences, and good stuff you're doing for the legal community, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit series Suits in terms of its reality if you've seen it?
I have seen it. It's been a few years. I'm not totally caught up. I would rate it a 3. However, I would feature Louis Litt as maybe a 10 because there's that law firm partner in every firm. And I just loved his quips and his back and forth and sarcasm. And the sarcasm aspect in a law firm is very, very real. So parts of it a 3, parts of it a 10.
Okay, good. Well, with that, we'll give it somewhere in the middle and we'll move swiftly on to talk all about you. So to begin with, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and journey?
Sure. And you provided some background and, kind of the resume and career journey. So I'll provide more some influences in my background, which really comes to my family and some personal influences growing up. And so if you go with me back for just a moment, my grandfather was an engineer. My aunt was a litigator and mom of 2, or she still is. And my father, he went to law school in his 40s, kind of later on in life to inform his business career, which was really innovation in the ophthalmology practice area in medicine. And so if you kind of blend all of those influences, you end up with engineer and the kind of maker mindset, a lawyer and litigator and some of the tradition, and then pushing innovation and operations in my father's medical space. But for me, that turned into the legal space and using a law degree in a different way in business. And so those were kind of some of the influences that brought me to a focus on business and law, not really knowing how that would end up or where I would end up, but just kind of trusting in the value proposition at that intersection. And fortunately, kind of timing was in my favor that technology has come far enough along that there are some really creative and exciting ways to kind of move law forward.
Yeah, and I love that. And such a good blend of backgrounds that you sort of outlined there from a family. And it's no wonder that, you've been very successful and gone on to do lots of things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But sort of sticking slightly further earlier on, you studied, as I mentioned in the intro, at Boston College Law School. What were your experiences studying at that law school?
So I had a great experience at Boston College Law School. It can be described as the Disney World of law schools, just in terms of the culture of the law school, of people actually collaborating and not having some of the infighting that can happen at law schools, given that people are really competing against one another and grading on a curve. So I had a wonderful time there. I had a professor, Ingrid Hillinger, who I claim she taught me how to write. I didn't know how to put sentences together before she taught me how to do so in a very structured and logical way, and actually developed a really great relationship with her. She officiated my wedding. So I would say I had a very positive experience at Boston College Law School. And as I look back, one of the kind of big impressions and takeaways I have is in the contrast between my experience at the law school and at the business school. So I did 2 years law school, and then you go over to the business school, and then you do a blend in the 4th year. And what really has impacted me, and I think about it a lot, is that in those first 2 years in law school, you are so narrow. It's getting really kind of blinders and focusing on issues to the utmost detail. And then in moving to the business school, those blinders come off because you're supposed to look across business and across profession and across industry to kind of take ideas and bring them into your thinking. And so it was this really different way of using your brain, of very, very narrow and technical to very broad based and perspective taking. And so I don't know, that's kind of my big impression in looking back on graduate school.
Yeah, and I love how you gave a good sort of, experience overview there. And, people have different experiences, and it's great that you had that personal relationship as well to then sort of carry through to sort of your later personal life with weddings. I love that little story. So thanks for sharing that. And you also spent some time as a senior law clerk, I believe, as well at Rob and Anusia PC. So what was your responsibilities you were given there? Tell us more.
Rob and Anusia is a medical malpractice litigation boutique. And remember that aunt I talked about at the beginning. I was the benefit of her position at that firm. And before law school, came in and worked there and got great experience. I was able to go and, quote, third chair a trial and really actually sit, with the lawyers in front of the bar and pretend and kind of play lawyer and see what that felt like. And it was an amazing experience. And so I really got experience from everything of drafting motions to training law students to going and playing lawyer in trial. And that was kind of that experience wrapped up.
Yeah, well, great experience. It sounds very sort of, in the mix. And, from there, obviously, you've progressed. You then, I believe you've worked on some very interesting cases because you also practiced as a commercial real estate finance attorney before. So can you tell us more about some of your experiences doing that?
Yes. So that was my first job out of law school, practicing as a commercial real estate finance attorney. And you can make it sound big and grand. I worked on syndicated loans from $500 million to $1 billion, from construction to senior credit facilities, on mezzanine debt. But at the end of the day, I was a first-year law associate. And so I spent a lot of time on closing binders and signature pages. And that's actually what got me really interested in legal tech, because I was pulling my hair out, not understanding how I had gone to law school, and now I was doing closing binders and signature pages in very old-fashioned ways. So that's what kind of opened my eyes up a bit to there's got to be a better way to do this.
Do you know what, that just gives me memories of, so my grandfather ran his own law firm here in the UK and was one of my reasons that I wanted to move into doing legal community building and helping people in the legal space. But I remember I was having to do like the binding and the stapling and actually so much manual intensive labor of carrying all these hard bundles, etc., etc. And I just thought, surely there's got to be another way with all of this stuff. So I can't wait till we talk about the sort of innovation tech side of things, which I didn't realize had such a family influence from your side before. So that's interesting. Because now you are the Senior Vice President, Enterprise Lead at United Lex. So can you tell us more what United Lex stands for and the services it delivers?
So United Lex is a law company, or pigeonholed as an alternative legal service provider, and works across litigation, legal operations, contracting, intellectual property, and knowledge management and engineering. And what I would say United Lex stands for is its investment in data science and technology in a way that a lot of other managed services providers have not historically done, or not done yet, or at least not that I've seen in this space. And that's the difference between offering different types of talent and offering, just as people and labor arbitrage, and offering a different value proposition. And that's what United Lex does.
Yeah, I love that. And, I'm all about sort of, ahead of the curve, or trying to look ahead of the curve, or, doing interesting entrepreneurial, innovative things. So within your role then, can you explain what your current role involves? Give us a day in the life.
Yeah, so it's helpful to explain my current role to give a brief history of me joining United Lex and how that came to be. So I was essentially recruited by the general counsel of enterprise client, potential client at the time, through the advisory work, through deal negotiation to final closure, in anticipation of a spin out. And so I was brought as his trusted relationship to, as he describes, be the spider in the web, smoothing everything out across all of the different service lines. And so I did that 50% of my time, and then 50% of my time I was internal knowledge lead. and I captured know-how from all of our domain experts and put it together and created logic that ties our solutions to client-specific challenge areas and then the objectives they're trying to achieve that are pretty much the same across all legal departments on performance improvement, revenue gain, cost reduction, those areas. And so that internal piece became a road mapping solution, an application called 𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 that we use now in enterprise conversations. And so I take that blend of experience now and work with general counsel and legal operations leads to find, is it a broad, holistic operating model that you are kind of ready and that the business pressures are enough to build and implement, or is there another place to start that might be a better fit culturally with your organization?
Sounds fascinating and super interesting work that you're getting involved in. Quite different day to day than some of the other guests that we have on, which I love, and that's what gets me excited about the show that we host. We bring on so many different people with different backgrounds, different experiences, and doing different things at different speeds in the legal profession. So let's stick with that, because you previously highlighted, I believe, one of the biggest challenges in today's law firms is recruiting partners, experienced associates, and senior business professionals into the firm, and then finding ways to integrate, retain them, and help make them sustainably productive. So in your opinion, what are some of the possible solutions to address that challenge you stated?
So that was based on research I did with Heidi Gardner out of Harvard Law School, and she was previously out of Harvard Business School. And you may have heard of her work on smart collaboration. And so we brought that through a lens to law firms in terms of recruiting. And if I'm honest, I'd have to go back and read the book that I wrote to remember kind of all of our conclusions. But I'm kidding. But the real, I think, big takeaway that I could offer for people is to hire teams versus stars, where you can take a person and think that that's the star, that they have this big book of business and it's all just them. But when you recruit them and bring them into a different environment, often that stardom can fade unless you bring them with the people and support that, not everyone, people don't just stand on their own. There are support systems and circumstances that are making them successful. And so I would say be really mindful of those circumstances before you bring them over and make sure to implement that as they come over. And then once they're there, and this comes from Heidi Gardner's work, is at the end of the day, you have to cross-sell them and integrate them into the business as quickly as possible in order to retain them so that they become part of the fabric of the firm.
Really good advice. And one thing that springs to my mind is my friend in the Web3 world, Fanzo, and he does a lot of work in sort of community building. And he has the expression, "We is greater than me." And I think that's so true in terms of when you're talking about team there. And, you can have this one superstar, but if they don't necessarily have the right values or shared values or something's different, having that whole team, you can go a lot farther together, because we've all heard, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, you go together, right? And I think there's real meaning behind that. So thanks for highlighting those foundings, and we know all the summary points of that book anyway, so it's all it's all okay. So again, casting your memory back a little bit, because prior to joining United Lex, like I said in the intro, you were the US Director of Innovation at 𝐤𝐬𝐬𝐧𝐠 Southern. So what projects did you work on there, and what practice groups and clients did you collaborate with?
So I worked across all practice groups, which it was insurance, energy, litigation, corporate, real estate, tax, and intellectual property. Tax was challenging because their buyers are different than the rest of the firm, where they're working a lot with CFOs and financial counterparts versus legal departments. And so the word innovation, the meaning of innovation can be a lot different based on the client need that you're trying to serve. And so through all of those different practice areas and through analyzing the clients and what their needs are, where the practices, innovation was much more relevant to some practices than it was to other, much more relevant to litigation than it is to an insurance advisory practice. And so that's really what I kind of brought to bear was, where does technology come into play versus where is it creative thinking and the creative problem solving and bringing in different types of talent. And it really depended on how advanced the technology was in different areas, and then the relationship with the client, the services that you're offering. So there was a lot to map out to then figure out what innovation means for the firm, but then at the individual practice level, at the individual attorney level. And so that's where I started, actually, was doing a listening tour around the firm and figuring out what do people are still doing air quotes on innovation. What do people mean by the word innovation? And so we, as a firm, defined it as broader than the implementation of software and equated it with client value. That's now regarded as service excellence, which I think is right. And we did do a lot of build projects to make sure that we went from the word innovation and people saying, okay, but what does that mean, to making it tangible. We didn't want to run the risk of vaporware and then nothing behind it. And so we had some great projects. We had a flagship one, the Spoliation Scientist, where we partnered with Fastcase, which is a legal research company that they too invest a lot in data and technology and building products, and their philosophy is democratizing the law, which I think is fantastic. But so we built in litigation, we built in compliance, we built learning modules working with a super major energy company, and then more basic things like how are you using what you already have and the tech stack that you already have. So selling things like 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐭𝐞𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐿 into the firm and making sure that they're adopted. So there was a lot of work across all areas of the firm.
Nice. And again, it sounds super busy, sounds super ahead of the curve, super interesting, just right up my street. Exactly the sort of stuff that if I was going to go and assault that role, I'd be really interested in, particularly that word innovation. I like to be in and around it. Time for a short break from the show. Are you still relying on spreadsheets to manage your legal matters? There's a better way to work. Our sponsor, 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐭𝐞𝐧𝐢𝐬𝐿, is the cloud-based legal software that will transform the way your law firm operates. They offer legal practice management and client onboarding software that doesn't cost the earth. In fact, from as little as £49 per month, you can cut out all of those tedious admin tasks that you dread doing each week, each month. Automate the boring stuff, free up more time for the important stuff. That's what you get with 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐿. Your clients will thank you for it, your bank account will thank you for it, your colleagues will thank you for it, and you can even thank me later for telling you all about it. So head to 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬.com/legally speaking to see how 𝐥𝐢𝐬𝐬 can help you. That's CLIO.com/legally speaking. Now back to the show. So switching from innovation to entrepreneurial life, in 2015, you founded a legal consulting service where you're providing leadership and development for rising attorneys. If I can get my words out, attorneys.
Good, it's not just me.
Yeah, you've got me going now, and I'm meant to be the host. I'm meant to be polished and refined, but hey, whatever. So what inspired you to start the consulting firm?
So I want attorneys to be happier, and that leads to now as well in my work and what I'm doing in taking the run work and putting it into machines and right fit talent and elevating attorneys to focus on some of the reasons they went to law school. I continue to believe that it's unfortunate that lawyers go and invest a lot of time and money and parts of ourselves to become attorneys and then can feel really shackled. And so that was really the mission of Benava. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I needed to do something. And so it turned into this leadership platform. It turned into working with women attorneys, specifically a focus there, because there's a lot of conversation around, for women attorneys specifically, and the horrible attrition rates. Is it the system or is it the women? And that's always kind of where it came down to. And it's like, for me, it is part system, but the system isn't going to change overnight. So what can you do now? And the only way to get control of your career in law is to bring in business. And so it was part business development, part standing out, part owning your voice, and those different areas to, again, become happier, to help yourself to kind of figure it out. I also had, as part of this, a talent platform that I pitched and failed to a Mass Challenge Accelerator program that was a similar concept of kind of upskilling and reskilling attorneys and putting them into business positions for areas that don't have a specific job description, where we need more nimble talent. And I think actually good that I failed in applying for Mass Challenge because it was way too early. But what I'm seeing now in talent and the needs, especially in-house, where people are doing rotations in different business units because the need to collaborate across functions is getting more and more and more. And I bet in the next 5 years, actually, that would be a relevant platform. But so that's what inspired me to jump to B'nava and really make it up as I went along. But fortunately, that's the work that brought me to Harvard Law School Executive Education. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue actually to what I was going to mention next. And I just want to sort of say that I really support your mission, because I talk about my mission of a kinder, more collaborative and happier legal community. And let's change what has been going on in the past to making a brighter, happier future. So I absolutely support that, and I love everything you're doing to be part of that change. And thank you for your work. But you did touch on Harvard Law School there, because you were a senior program manager, program manager design and development there. So would you mind telling us a bit more? How did you go about designing business of law and leadership programs?
Yeah, so by designing them, it was really just heavy consultation with faculty experts, with people in the industry. I had the great privilege of working with Scott Westfall and David Wilkins, and with their vast networks in law to get a global perspective. And that was really the big jump for me, was from a pretty local Boston perspective to all of a sudden this global view on what the needs are. And so worked in heavy consultation with them to develop the programs and figure out what the gaps are, and just really listen and then piece together the programs in the right way so that people are able to kind of opt in and experience the programs. We did create a women's leadership program that was a different model, that had a kind of intro session and then collaborative work and then a capstone session to kind of show leadership in action. So we innovated and created new models as well based on market need, and that came from some of the listening of, I go to these 5-day programs, but then it's so hard to implement and it's so hard to stay accountable. I leave, this is what I'm hearing. This is the participants. I leave so excited. I leave with a notebook full of ideas, but then I return to life, and life gets going and really fast. And how do I make sure to implement it, especially when the general counsel in these programs are going by themselves? I would really suggest they go with their number two, or go with, a cohort, so that you can action and implement all of that learning after the program. So a lot of consultation, a lot of kind of tweaking the models to see what works, how we could improve it. And that was my work there.
I love it. And sort of, tweaking and testing again. I'm all for that. But again, another fascinating, super interesting role. And talking of interesting, you have a real interest in legal development. So you recently published an article on ethical duties of legal innovation. So can you share more around some of your findings there?
Sure. And I wouldn't claim them as my findings. I interviewed Professor Renee Jefferson. She's an academic expert on the topic. Ed Walters, the CEO of Fastcase, the legal research company I mentioned earlier. And he's also a professor on AI on the law. Bob Ambrogi, who's the legal tech analyst. And then Kat Moon, who's a professor and director of innovation design at Vanderbilt University Law School. And in interviewing all of them, I guess the finding is that they all said, at the end of the day, it's worth it to create an ethical duty of innovation. And the takeaway for me was, we are a profession that runs on documentation. And so unless something's documented, is it real in law? And so that's where I think that it is important to document the ethical duty of innovation. People read it into, in the US, the ABA model rules, but if it's real, we should document it. And I think that's kind of the finding, was that even though, again, in the US, it's comment 8 that requires tech competence, and people can say, oh, it doesn't have teeth, how is it enforced? You got to start somewhere. It's been adopted by 40 states. So, you can debate it, but the finding was that it's worth the effort.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, again, it's great that you've had the opportunity to speak and meet and interview so many amazing minds that, really sort of, shaping, the current and the future of legal services. And that again leads me on to more legal innovation, because you recently hosted, and I had the pleasure of attending, the super well subscribed virtual roundtable event with Richard Susskind and Mark Cohen, as I mentioned in the intro, the transformation of legal, technology, data, and human adaptation. What did you, Richard, and Mark discuss during the event, and what were some of your key takeaways from it?
So we covered 4 topics. We covered technologies like, and I know some people are sick of hearing about it, but ChatGPT and knowledge systems. We talked about talent and the different types of talent that are going to be needed for the foreseeable future, but especially over the next 5 to 10 years. Mark Cohen then talked about law as a business story and why stagnation is not an option. And then we went into technology and innovation in law, and Richard suggesting that we're still at the foothills of technology and the impact in law, which I think is right, but also don't underestimate the impact. I do think that ChatGPT is different, where we're moving from search to create, we're moving to generate, we're moving to draft. And not only is this disruptive for law firms, but it's disruptive for companies like United Lex too. We have to harness that and have that as part of our solutions and thinking in order to not, have that get in front of us. So there was a lot to think about and talk about, both culturally and technically, from both of them. And I guess the big takeaway from Mark's section on stagnation is not an option, that this is a business story, that, the C-suite is getting savvy to the value in legal departments that they haven't had visibility into thus far, because legal departments have lagged in becoming digital and having transparency and data to then report on actually some of the value opportunities within the organization. And so if they don't take control of some of the modernizations themselves, it's going to be forced. And that was the takeaway from Mark, and stagnation is not an option.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. We've got to keep moving forward with the times. And you also make a very good point, even about sort of United Lex and, myself, my own businesses, I have a legal talent solutions firm, podcast. I've just launched a new podcast show, Podcast AI, which is completely running on AI and, a new experience and quite interesting things that are happening. None of us are immune. And I think you all have to be curious, ask questions, and think, don't stay, because what's always happened is not always going to continue to happen in this particular exponential sort of next 5-10 years, where I see tech adoption really going to the hills. So sticking with collaboration, again, something I'm part of in terms of really trying to collaborate in this legal industry, kind of happier. You have also been the co-author of Smart Collaboration for Lateral Hiring, Successful Strategy to Recruit and Integrate Laterals in Your Firm. So I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you tell us more a bit about your publication?
Sure. That publication was with Heidi Gardner, as I referenced earlier. And it really was leveraging her research in smart collaboration. And for her, smart collaboration is disciplined, but it's also proactive. And I think that's the difference in what needs to happen for lateral hiring. If firms don't already have a director of lateral integration, of someone who focuses on this as their job, it's going to continue to fall down, because partners don't know, who are recruited, I would say for the most part, don't know how to integrate themselves other than joining meetings. And now too, with hybrid work, how are you doing that? So actually there should probably be an update to the book as to best practices for doing that in a hybrid environment. But those were some of the focus areas for the book.
Yeah, no, and important areas as well. And you have outlined, you wanted to solve law firm business challenges since my first legal position in the early 2000s. Many legal professionals who came before me had the same itch to improve the business of law, creating an informal subculture that has existed for decades. I quote, so since your first legal position, what are the biggest changes you've witnessed regarding the business of law?
So that first legal position and that quote was in reference to something a little different, where I was part of a law firm that had an accounting scandal, where the accountant one day just didn't come back from lunch. She had, walk in, just picture, she still had 10 pairs of shoes under the desk. There was still, a Coke can on the desk kind of thing. And it was literally just disappeared, not like she had tidied up and was, quitting or anything like that. Just house of cards had fallen down and she left and did not come back. And for me, that was an aha moment. And I guess this is where I got some of my interest in lawyer education of how do you have these smart, successful, professional, educated lawyers who let that happen in their organization. And so that was more of a kind of business perspective and learning for me on how are we not leveraging best practices from business, from other areas in law. That was kind of my first awakening to so much opportunity to improve the law. I would say my own focus and thinking has moved more into technology. And that's also, I guess, to answer your question, what's changed since the early 2000s is the technology. And that's what's making everything more exciting and happening now.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. I'm all for this. I'm on the sort of embrace bus. So before we finish up, one last time I'd like to pick your brain. What advice do you wish you had known before starting your legal journey?
I wish that someone had emphasized to me the importance of finding your quote tribe of people and how that evolves as you evolve and being really mindful to do that. I had a conversation actually just recently with a friend, an industry friend, who kind of reminded me who I am and what my focus is. And it's amazing how you can forget that sometimes along the way. And he described me as a maker. And I forgot that I am a maker. And so, your tribe, not just for support and camaraderie and learning, but also to remind you who you are as you go, because you can lose track of that sometimes. And so that would be what I wish someone had told me before starting in legal.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, I again, one of my mentors said, grow as you go. And I think, that just came into my head when you mentioned that as well. And, it's so true though, because when you have this community, they are there for you and will help kind of, redirect you, and you put yourself out there, your true self, you're authentic, and people will see those qualities and kindly remind you of them. So that's a really nice way to sort of, conclude the session today. And with that, if our listeners would like to know more about you, what you've got planned in the future, or indeed United Lex, what's the best way for them to contact you? Feel free to shout out any media, social media, or web links, and we'll also share them with this episode for you too.
Thank you. Social media, I'm mostly on LinkedIn, and feel free to email me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anusia, for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed listening to your story, your journey, and sort of all the great things you're doing. And it's been a really heart-centered, innovative conversation. So really, really grateful for your time. And from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, I'd like to wish you lots of continued success with your career. But from all of us for now, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.